know what really makes us mad? Is wasting money on CDs with only one or two good songs.
Yeah. Tell them about punk.
What's up, posers? Welcome to Punk Lotto Pod. I'm your co-host, Justin Hensley.
And I'm your other co-host, Dylan Hensley. And I took a drink of water right when he introed me.
No one would have known. You're telling on yourself.
Yeah.
And this is a show where we choose 1 year at random and select one punk, hardcore, emo, or punk-adjacent album from that year to discuss. Patreon.com/punklotopod. For $1, you get access to all of our weekly bonus audio. Our most recent piece of bonus audio is a News of the World, where we talk about the news stories over the last month. We went really long on
twists and turns, and
yeah, we talk about everything.
Those are interesting conversations. If you like rambling conversations with a loose format,
yeah, it probably is our most loose show that we do.
I feel like, yeah. Because the I'm listenings, we stay pretty on topic. Because we have a list to get through, more or less. Yeah. Not a firm list, but there are better parameters than just scrolling through punk news and going, what else?
Our others like chart dives and bracketologies. Those are pretty focused on the albums at hand that we're discussing. Because there's not a lot of room to waste time on those. Because sometimes those can go long, and the Master Punk Theaters too, talking about a movie. So yeah, we do a lot of different things over on the Patreon. So you get your dollar's worth for sure. So yeah, patreon.com/punklotopod. You can also join in our $10 tier for a one-time donation, and you get to choose what album we devote an entire episode to. That reminds me, we got a list. Our buddy who has signed up for the last $10 has sent us a list of he's pulling the Dave Brown method and just like here's a couple and you choose one of these. We're down for that too. If you got multiples you can't decide, send us a list and we'll be like, yeah, we'll do that. So yeah. So this week's episode we are doing the year 1987, and I assigned you that particular year.
Yes. Last time we did 1987 was with Sharky, and we did Poison Idea. Is that right?
Oh man, you know what? I pulled that up when we were deciding what year to do. So let me pull that back up again. 1987. Yes, we did that in June of 2022. John Sharkey the third. We did Poison Idea's War All the Time, and then prior to that, we did way back in episode 64, the Agnostic Front, the hated episode with the Hard Times guys, which that was that was a wild episode. They just took over.
Yeah, that was a fun one. It was interesting.
And before that, it was episode 33. We did the Wipers, Follow Blind, and Henry Rollins drive-by shooting. Henrietta Collins.
Yeah.
We did 2 in 1987 in 2019. That was weird. But yeah. So we haven't really hit 87 a lot.
We really haven't touched 87 a lot. That's why I was having such a hard time remembering what we talked about, because what we have talked about previously has honestly not been that memorable, in terms of the records themselves, but the conversations certainly were fairly memorable. But
yeah. So I gave you that year, and then you sent me a couple options about things that you were thinking about talking about.
Do we want to talk about what I almost picked, or do we want to talk about the charts? Do we want to look at? Let's talk about what I considered.
Yeah, let's do. What did you almost like for us to talk about,
and then we can look at the charts. Definitely one of the bigger records that jumped out to me to talk about was Darklands by the Jesus and Mary Chain. Is it a controversial opinion to say that this is their best record? I don't think so. I think there's enough people that would say that it wouldn't be. If you were a guy who has just never listened to more than one Jesus and Mary Chain record, that might be a controversial opinion to you, because Psycho Candy still gets that title, I guess. It has that designation. Culturally significantly extremely important record. Like, absolutely, it's an important record, and I understand why it gets held up for being that, but it's not their best. It's like actually like my fourth favorite of theirs. Honestly, I like it a lot, but it is not the most easily listenable record. And I really actually do listen to Jesus and Mary Chain for their listenability. And and not for the noisiness that they're famous for.
It's funny how like they are like known for Psycho Candy more than any other record in their discography, but it also is like the least representative of their overall sound.
Yeah.
And-
Everything else is totally different. Like you've got like a gothy record, you've got like a good Rob Zombie sounding record, you've got like a jangly, mostly acoustic record that fucking rules. I don't know Monkey. I actually haven't listened to Monkey. That's the other one I need to listen to.
I bet it's like proto Corn, right?
I don't know. I'm not sure where they would have gone with that record.
I just said that because one of the guys in Corn's name is Monkey.
Yeah, I think
Monkey Head.
The Darklands is that's one that could come up again in the future. It's also one of those records that I feel like a guest could pick if we ever assign anyone 87 again.
Yeah. Seems inevitable, but
it's been 2 years since we did it. But
yeah.
So maybe not. Another all-time classic record we've certainly talked about in the past, and we've talked about probably was on our 100 and 100 episode, which is not why I excluded it or passed on it for this one. But Embrace is self-titled, came out in 87. I love that record. I think it's super fun. It's way easier to come back to than like Minor Threat.
Yeah. Most of that hardcore stuff is not that easy to come back to.
And I think more so than even like a lot of the Fugazi records, I don't come back to as often as I come back to the Embrace.
Yeah, I feel like Embrace is a little more easily digestible than a lot of the Fugazi discography is. Early Fugazi is probably the easiest to go down, but then there is like a little bit of headiness to the back half of the Fugazi discography. And
there's like the intensity level with early Fugazi too, where you're not always necessarily feeling that, but I feel like there's a little more balance to Embrace. That's a record we'll do someday. I mean, truly, honestly, I know we will pick it. If no one else ever picks it, the next time we do 87, you or I are probably going to pick it.
Yeah, probably, yeah.
Because we're just, we can look at the charts. 87's not a great year.
I think it's why we don't come back. We don't come to the late 80s that often for that very specific reason. Because it's a weird period for punk music. Because it feels like, in general, music is more interested in the emerging stuff going on, with your college rock and indie rock basically being invented during this time period, and noise rock being a really strong element. We've got like all our hardcore bands for the most part are doing like thrash now. Yeah, 87, late 80s in general, tough period to look at, because it just doesn't seem like the quality is that deep.
Yeah, and I mean, there's stuff like the last Husker Du record, Warehouse. I think is a great record. I think it's an underrated record. But is that the one I want to come back to Husker Du for? We've talked about Husker Du on the show a couple of times.
Yeah, we've done a few.
So I didn't really consider that one just because I was just like, this feels like it's kind of like one of the least essential Husker Du records. How much are we really going to... It's the end of the band too, though. So, I mean, I guess there's enough of the story there to tell. But I figured we can give ourselves a little more time. And I was more inclined to do something we hadn't really talked about before. So I did also consider the first Goo Goo Dolls record that it came out in 87, back when they were a hardcore band. It has like a 2.64 on Rate Your Music. And I'm like, that's not right. Is it? Like, I think I've heard punk Goo Goo Dolls stuff, like early Goo Goo Dolls records before, and they're not bad. I think it's purely just a case of it's not the Goo Goo Dolls that people expect to hear. So I was not even morbidly curious about that one, but ended up not pulling the trigger on that.
Yeah, 1987 in general, this is the year. Let's do the big names, I guess. This is the first Dinosaur Jr. record, back when they were just Dinosaur, and they were on SST. We got a Sonic Youth record, Sister. I don't know that one. Weirdly, that one's very high up here, but why?
Because it's Sonic Youth. And because it's between Evil and Daydream Nation,
I guess. Weird that it's more popular than the Joshua Tree by U2. Like, I find that hard to believe, but this is Rate Your Music. So
it's Rate Your Music. Yeah, I'm not too surprised by that. I don't think you're realizing how much Rate Your Music loves Sonic Youth.
Yeah, I don't get it.
Yeah, not really.
we did our Goo Goo Dolls, or Goo Goo Dolls. I'd rather talk about them. We did our Sonic Youth Goo episode, and that was a guest selected album too. So that was one where we were just like, man, I don't like this band. Even on like that record with a guest, we were still like, not for me, man.
It's fine. I can appreciate things about, their most popular records, but Big Black Song's about fucking. That's definitely a big deal. Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me by The Cure.
Yeah, Pop Cure. Yeah.
Which that one I was like, maybe, but
yeah, we've never done a Cure record, have we?
I didn't pull that one, but no, we haven't. And that's one I would be inclined to do.
And while they're sometimes a goth rock band, I never really want to do them in like our Halloween Spectacular stuff because they feel like they're not just that. Yeah,
they do transcend that genre.
That being said, that's a double LP and like 74 minutes long.
Yeah.
We have The Floodland by Sisters of Mercy. That's like their big record. Speaking of goth rock, we got Pleased to Meet Me by The Replacements.
Pretty big deal record. Yeah.
That's a big one in their discography.
I briefly thought about that Wedding Present record, George Best. I don't know. I feel like there's got to be one Wedding Present record that we should do at some point. I don't know which one it is. That's the first Wedding Present record.
According to Rate Your Music, Sea Monsters is the most listened, most rated. That's their third record.
Bizarro is like the highest rated. So
you always say we should do a Wedding Present record, but do we? I hear no one ever talk about that band.
I'm surprised they're not talked about more. I've seen some live footage of them from like really early on, and I'm like, this is if the Smiths was good. I don't know. I've listened to a couple Wedding Presents records. I enjoy them, but I guess I haven't given them enough time to really feel like I can speak on them.
We did discuss Through the Looking Glass by Susie and the Banshees. We did that on our Best Worst Over Under, which we need to do another one of those. We need to do another one of those. We need to pick an artist and do another Best Worst Over Under because that's a top 10 episode for us. And like our most watched and listened on YouTube. So like we should really do that. It's probably because it's Susie more than anything. So I guess it would be like, I don't know. We'd have to figure out who to do. But
The Ideal Copy by The Wire. I've heard that record. It's all right. That's the comeback record.
Yeah. The Ramones, Halfway to Sanity.
Yeah. Not that one though.
Yeah. It's got I Want to Live and Garden of Serenity. That's kind of it.
I forgot about this. So I had it in my head that 87 is one of those years that falls off like immediately on the next page. But there's like All by Descendants. There's a Violent Femmes record. There's a Gun Club record. There's a Pill record. There's a Meat Puppets record. Love and Rockets. So there's more. There's a substantial amount of stuff. If In by Fire Hose. It's the first one, right?
Yeah. Which we've covered on our Challengeography. And the original version of Challengeography.
Oh, Wig Out at Dinko's. Dag Nasty. That's a big one.
Why is it so far down?
I don't know. That's weird. Yeah.
That is strange that is that deep. It's a famous record. Very weird.
And even like page 3, there's like a Lemonheads and Red Cross and Agnostic Front. X, See How We Are. The one
I know why that.
Without Billy Zoom. It's not a bad record.
I mean, it's probably better than the last Billy Zoom record before it.
Oh, it's definitely better than Ain't Love Grand.
Yeah.
Now, See How We Are is not a bad record. 4th of July is a great song. Cyrano de Berger's Back is on there. It's a good record. Underrated. Well, there's a record by a band that's related to the band we are talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw that too. There's a Warzone record. I mean,
yeah. The Prong record. All right.
I'd say 87 might be a little more. Hey, we got Mission of Burma's Forget back here too. That's not a studio album, but still notable record in their discography. Yeah, it's tough. I'd have to like take 86, 87, 88, and 89 and like lay out all the year and then just see like who has the better year between the four of them. I think 86 is more interesting in non-punk music.
Yeah. And I do think that a lot of the interesting things that are related to punk are more in the punk adjacent, or at least on the edges of punk, and more into like the subgenres of punk. of early emo and hardcore and even like supposed punk stuff.
Just for reference, though, 1987 is also Appetite for Destruction by Guns N' Roses. It is Bad by Michael Jackson. Some pretty massive records in 1987. So REM's Document is there. It's yeah. Big year.
Sign of the Times, Music for the Masses.
Tango in the Night by Fleetwood Mac. Oh. Big Def Leppard, Hysteria. Yeah, pretty big year. It's probably because...
Tunnel of Love by Bruce.
Yeah. It's just punk is just not the in thing at the point in 87.
Yeah.
It feels like late 80s, everybody was just listening to rock music for the most part.
Punk died in
86. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's get into it. So... What's so funny?
You know what this episode is about. If you're listening to this, you clicked on the title. So I hope you understand why I'm laughing.
All right, I gave you the year 1987, and you selected Scum by Napalm Death. Stats on the band from Meriden in the West Midlands in England. Formed in 1981, this album was released July 1st, 1987 on Earache Records. This is the band's debut full-length album. And the personnel on this record: Nicholas Bullen on bass and vocals, Lee Dorian on vocals, Jim Whitley on bass, Mick Harris on drums and vocals, Justin Broderick on guitar, and Bill Steer on guitar. And the album was produced by the band, as well as the band Head of David, as well as the band Unseen Terror, as well as Digby Pearson, who was the owner of Earache Records. And some of those names might sound familiar to you, but Napalm Death are the most famous grindcore band of all time. Like, I don't think there's even a question. They are the most famous grindcore band of all time.
Yeah. No. Yeah, I mean, so Napalm Death it's like the extreme metal genres, they all kind of have like their first band.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny how, I guess it's just the way that metal works and the way that metal fans categorize music, but they're very definitive in genres. And so it's like, death metal is like death and black metal is Bathory,
Or no,
it's kind of like, or Venom. Bathory is definitely super early. And I mean, even like, Venom and Death are like, Venom's more of a thrash band and Death is kind of more of a thrash band early on. But every subgenre of metal just kind of like, they almost have a mindset of like, well, I am going to push the boundaries as an artist. I am going to define something. Throughout a lot of metal's history. I don't think it is that way anymore. It's definitely gotten a little more strict about subgenres. But I say that, and there's still a fair amount of like kind of blending subgenres. But there's just like a very conscientious, like, oh, I'm taking from this genre and mixing it with this genre kind of thinking. But so much of metal history is just like, oh yeah, I created a new genre of music. And like, I'm the band.
Which feels like with punk music, it's just like you just kept reiterating on the same genre and just like, oh, I created something different, but still punk.
So like,
but still hardcore.
Yeah, I think Napalm Death are. I guess I'd be curious to see if there's something that gets classified as grindcore that came out prior, but I don't think so. Nothing significant. If anything, there's like a demo.
Yeah.
So, but pretty much immediately, like with this record, Napalm Death is like codifies a genre and is just like, which I guess I didn't find much on this. I didn't really look into it, but where the term grindcore came from and where it was used first, I didn't think about looking into that.
No, I didn't look into that either.
I wish I had thought of that, because I would be curious to see if it's one of those like retroactive genre names.
Yeah.
Or if it was something that people were pretty. But I've definitely seen references to grindcore pretty early, like late 80s and early 90s at least. So I think it was probably getting used pretty commonly.
Yeah. So first question as always, what made you choose this album for us to discuss? Out of all your options there, why'd you go with this one?
So I had a couple of like faithfuls, some familiar faces, some standbys, but I told you I'm feeling weird.
Oh yeah. Which I thought meant was going to go in a different direction than what you did.
But Scum was one of the first records that popped up on the charts that I went, ooh, I could be interested in doing that. So I kind of decided to just go with that instinct. And I felt like we've done a lot of stuff that felt much more in our wheelhouse recently, and some stuff that we really like that are just like, Crowbait, or talking about Devo, like stuff that are just like we have a long history with. So I was like, I'm curious enough. I'm in the mood to listen to something that is not something I've listened to a bunch. And 87 felt like a good year to do that in. And when I sent it to you, I mean, you were like, that is the one Napalm Death record.
Weirdly. Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
There's a lot of reasons why it's the one.
Yeah.
There's a lot of reasons. This record, there's a story here to tell.
Yeah. Which that's what I figured. I'm like, okay, there's the story of this record, which I already kind of had some of those details in mind. But like when I saw it, I was like, oh, isn't that the deal? Kind of remembering what details I had learned about it a long ass time ago. There's a little bit of personal history with it and with this band that I thought would be worth discussing. There's also just kind of like the factor of its legacy and how it lives up to its legacy and how that relates to the band's career that I figured is worth talking about too. So there's a lot to talk about. I'm actually really excited to talk about this record, which is really unusual. And we don't do metal stuff, and this is almost a metal record. So
yeah. So man, there's like 5. I'm standing at the Devil's Crossroads, and I'm like, which way do I go?
Yeah. There's a lot of paths to take with this one.
Should we do?
I would say we should tell the story of the record in as condensed a version as we can.
Yeah, let's do the story then. So, as we mentioned before, they formed in 1981, and the group was initially formed by Nicholas Bullen and Miles Ratledge. While they were teenagers, they were initially influenced by the first wave of UK punk, and especially anarcho-punk like Crass. They were very much like super into the anarchist punk scene at the time. They added a guitarist, Simon Oppenheimer, and then that original lineup lasted 2 months. And then it became a revolving door of musicians, lots of people coming in and out, playing different instruments, just like briefly, short periods, multiple people coming in and out. They did play their very first show with bands like Amoebics and Antisect, so they were very much tied into the crust and anarcho-punk scene at that time. They became like a house band of sorts to a club, and which was also why they got to play with so many of these bands.
Yeah.
So it's a revolving door for a while. They record some demos. They put some songs on comps, and then they go on hiatus in 1983. So while they're on hiatus, Nick meets Justin Broderick, and they bonded over their mutual interest in music. They both liked Killing Joke and Throbbing Gristle, as well as Crass and other anarcho-punk bands. Killing Joke and Throbbing Gristle being more important to Justin Broderick's career than Nick's.
Yeah.
So Napalm Death reforms for a one-off show in 1985. They asked Justin Broderick to join the band on guitar. And this version of the band is Nick Bullen, Justin Broderick, and Miles Ratledge. And their first show back was with Chumbawamba.
Yeah. The anarchist punk band, Chumbawamba.
Yeah. I mean, it actually makes perfect sense if you know anything about Chumbawamba's history and what they were
just
like.
Hilarious. Chumbawamba and Napalm Death. And it's like neither version of the band that the majority of people are familiar with.
Yeah. So Broderick and Bullen, they want to push the music in more extreme directions and really like push boundaries. And there's a little bit of a disagreement there with Miles Ratledge. And he's like, all right, I'm out. He goes and plays another band. So they bring in new drummer Mick Harris. And this version of the band recorded what was to be half of a split album with the band Atavistic that never came to fruition. So those songs are shelved. Nick is frustrated with the direction that they're going in. And so they brought in Jim Whitley to play bass for him while Nick only does vocals. I think the story with Nick is he just gets tired of it very quickly. My assuming is he was tired of playing bass. And so he's just like, I'll just do vocals. That's easy. So they play as a 4-piece for a while until Justin Broderick leaves the band to join Head of David. And they tried out some other guitar players, but Nick was like, I'm over it. He left the band and he went to university and studied literature and philosophy. And he's done. He's out of Napalm Death forever. He's gone.
The guy who started the band and kept it going for years with, very little traction and just recording demos and not getting any label interest. And he's like, I'm going to the school. I'm done.
I wonder what he's like now. I have an idea of what a philosophy major from England looks like, but I wonder what he looks like now. I guess you look it up, but
I'm curious about that though. I mean, like a crust kid going and studying philosophy.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'd be curious to know what direction he goes in.
So we are left with the bassist and a drummer. We have Jim Whitley and Mick Harris left. And they're like, well, why not? We can just keep going.
We've inherited this band.
Yeah. We are not original members, but here we are. Nick obviously was like, I don't give a shit. And Justin had already left. So I guess they were just like, okay, we'll keep going. So they bring in Bill Steer, who was playing in a little band called Carcass at the time.
Yeah.
He's brought in to play guitar.
We should also mention Justin Broderick, who's now out of the picture.
Yes. He joins Head of David.
But that's not what he's known for. He's known for going on and playing in Godflesh.
Yeah. Yeah, he's in Head of David, which is more in line with what he eventually winds up doing with the band Godflesh, and then Jesus much longer in the future. So yeah, we already have 2 legendary musicians in this band at this point. And they're not even known for this band, really, if you really think about it. It's not why they're famous. But
yeah.
They then ask their friend Lee Dorian to join as a vocalist, despite him never being in a band before. And so the band goes in the studio. They record. It's kind of funny. There's Lee is so inexperienced with being in a band that while they're recording, he has to get cues from Mick Harris to be like, and go. Now sing, to do his part. He's just that new to music.
He can't latch on to the entry point, the beat where he's supposed to start singing. Well, and they also recording this material that they go in the studio to record. They had 3 hours of rehearsal time on this material. One of the guys just used the top 2 strings on the guitar because he didn't know how to play guitar. That was Mick. Mick's
the drummer. He didn't know how to play guitar, but he wrote some music on this record. And they did this thing. They kind of did the Minutemen sort of thing where they recorded at night because it was cheaper to record at night.
Yeah.
So they got a little deal there. The original split that they were going to do, they were supposed to give those masters to the guy who ran the club that they used to play at all the time. But they decided to keep it because he never paid them for those shows.
He paid for the recordings, but they're like, you didn't pay us for the shows, so we're just keep the masters.
So they kept the masters.
And they were the house band, Yeah. They were playing there regularly because they could draw a crowd.
Yeah. And so Dig is the producer on this. He runs Earache Records. Earache has released exactly like 3 records by this point, and it's like The Accused, Concrete Socks and Heresy Split, and this. So he Dig puts all of his money into this because it's such a new label, nobody knows anything about it, and he was like, well, I want a full length. He's like, I don't want to do a split first. Like, I don't want your first record to be a split. I don't want your first record to be an EP. I want an LP. So they took that side A with the entire different lineup of a band, and that is the Justin Broderick and Nick Bullen side. That is side A. And then on the B side is the Bill Steer and Lee Dorian side of the record. So we get a full-length album, which is what Scum is. So really, if you look at it, it's the first Napalm Death record is a split with itself. Yeah. Basically, it's practically 2 different bands, kind of. They're playing the same kind of music, but yeah. So to wrap up this period of the band, they go on a short tour for the album release. Then Jim Whitley leaves the group. He's their bass player. He quits. They bring in a new member of the band. They do another record, and they do an EP called Mentally Murdered. They tour Japan, and then Lee Dorian and Bill Steer both leave the band in 1989.
Yeah.
Bill's like, Carcass is going full time, so it's taking up his time. And then Dorian leaves to go form doom metal band Cathedral, which is a famous doom metal band. So out of Napalm Death, we have Carcass, we have Godflesh, we have Cathedral, all spun out of this band, and they all,
or at least related, Yeah, because Carcass was going already, but
they were contemporaries. This is when they bring in Barney Greenaway, who becomes the vocalist for the rest of the band's history. Yeah. And then Mick Harris leaves the group in 1991 due to creative differences, thus becoming the final member who played on Scum to leave Napalm Death. And none of them ever come back. I mean, I guess it's because no one in any other later version of Napalm Death is like connected to the band in any way. To those people in any way. Mick Harris being the only one who like played with anyone else, because they get like a new guitarist like right away too. But he stays until 91. So that is the Scum family tree and kind of the background on this record.
Yeah, so Dig takes a chance on this, cobbles together an LP, and then it turns into a success. It kind of runs away, like, shockingly.
It sold 10,000 copies in its first year, making it the number 4 UK indie album of the year. Or peaks at that number. They get on John Peel. Yeah, and that gives them a whole nother audience, and then like they press like 20,000 more copies of the record, and so it was a Hail Mary. It was just like, I'm putting all my money in this. If this record doesn't take off, my label is probably dead.
Yeah,
and because it was so successful, Earache Records is still around today, and one of like the biggest metal labels in the world, probably the biggest European metal label at this point. So runaway hit.
It's a record that launched a lot of ships. I mean, it was for something that shouldn't have worked. 2 different lineups of the same band recording demo quality recordings becomes successful, and creates like Napalm Death has like never not existed.
Right.
Like, I mean, massive lineup changes, but they've kept going. And, there are some consistent members from pretty early into their career. onward, from the early 90s onward, because Barney's still there, you know. So this record, I think, naturally has a legacy. It, you know, kind of defines a genre of music, launches a bunch of careers, launches, a household name. A huge record label is, you know, has this record to thank for its existence and success, which has given, in Rise, has given how much success to how many other metal bands. Because how many bands did Earache put out that are still going? You know, the first thing they did was probably with Earache. So really interesting story.
Yeah.
On that alone, and legacy, which I guess we can kind of branch into the legacy of the record. I remember, and this kind of ties into my first introduction to the band, and I guess I want to corroborate this with you. Do you remember what your first introduction to Napalm Death was?
My first introduction to the band Napalm Death is the 1994 soundtrack to the major motion picture Mortal Kombat. That is the first Napalm Death song I ever heard.
Yeah, I did
not know what that meant at the time. Yeah. Like, I did not know who a Napalm Death was. I probably didn't think of it that much at all at the time. I definitely think that's the first instance of that kind of vocal that I ever encountered. Yeah, it was just a name I knew too. Like, it wasn't a song that stood out to me. That soundtrack is weird. It's like metal bands and industrial bands and like electronic stuff in there too. It's a strange record. Many 90s action movies had weird soundtracks.
But yeah, that would have been like actually know what the genre of music is. I guess, where's your re-entry point?
I guess becoming aware of Napalm Death is, I know the name. I probably have heard the word grindcore by this point. I feel like the first thing that I like really listened to that they were a part of, though, was their version of Nazi Punk's Funk Off. Am I on a PG? Am I a PG rated movie on TV right now? Nazi Punk's Fuck Off on the Virus 100 Dead Kennedys tribute album.
The Parliament Napalm Death collab. Oh, okay. So yeah.
And then I don't know where I go from there. I just become aware of them through just reading metal magazines, I guess, at that stage. We have a buddy who was really into that kind of music.
Yeah.
So that might be where you pick off, but yeah.
Yeah, my firmest memories, I mean, other than the Mortal Kombat soundtrack, which I don't think really registered to me as a kid. I don't know that I even recognized it as music. I would have been so young.
Yeah.
We would have stopped listening to the tape before it came on.
It was on the B side of the tape. I remember that.
Yeah. So my firmest early memories of Napalm Death are like through our friend, our neighbor, and him being into extreme metal, and we were kind of like, so we were getting into that stuff through him, and also getting really into like classic hardcore and punk stuff around that time. And there's two things that I either remember or that are first, and I can't remember exactly which one it was. I remember him showing me the music video where it's a song off of probably The Code is Red, like one of their mid 2000s records, where there's like a sign language interpreter doing the sign language for the lyrics. Weird. But they like get covered in blood progressively throughout. Like there's like these cuts, and then they're like have more blood on them. I want to say they were wearing like all white or something in a white room. Kind of generic mid 2000s video, but except for the sign language thing. But it's either that or there was an anniversary article or like a back page kind of this classic record where we have someone write a guest write a review of it or talk about the record or something in Decibel. Mm-hmm. Seems most likely it was Decibel.
Probably.
That talked about Scum by Napalm Death. Mm-hmm. And I remember just seeing that and reading that and being like, that's an important record. And just filing that away. It's like, well, that's the important Napalm Death record. I now know that for life. So I have had it in my head for a really, really long time that they're an important band. For almost as long as I've known who they are.
Yeah.
They've been presented as, this is a band you should respect.
Yeah.
Which is kind of funny. Like I texted our cousin. Usually when I'm listening to heavy stuff, I'll text him about it and just be like, hey, you ever listen to them? Or like, hey, remember this record? And I was like, hey, you ever listen to Napalm Death? And he's like, nah, I really never got into them, but I've always known that I'm supposed to respect them. So I was like, yeah, I kind of did the same thing. But I've listened to Napalm Death records in the past, and I have listened to Scum in the past. I probably listened to it post college, within the first few years of having Spotify, just being like, oh, well, I can just now check this out. Something that I wouldn't have devoted the hard drive space to in the past to take a chance on. Which is like, oh, that's a classic record. That's important. I should listen to that. So like, let me see how it stacks up to its legacy. And my thinking going into this episode is like, I remember not being very thrilled by it the first time I listened to it. Not disliking it, but just kind of thinking like, well, I guess it's the first one is why it's important. That was kind of my takeaway is, well, it's first. It's not really a great record, but it's just the beginning of a career and a genre. So it didn't become anything that I listened to regularly. I didn't really go any further with the band. In recent years, I have listened to a couple of their records as they've come up on my calendar, my reusable calendar system. I've been like, oh, hey, that's a Napalm Death record, and people seem to like it. I'll check it out. And I've been like, I enjoyed them. Like I was like, this is pretty good. I can get something out of this, but I don't go to heavy music super often. So, it didn't become anything that I listened to regularly. It was just like, yeah, I'll check their records out from time to time.
I'm in a similar boat as far as they never really became a band that I was interested in. I never really listened to much they did. Like besides like they did a split with Coalesce and they did a split with Converge. Like I listened to those songs.
Yeah.
I've listened to like compilation appearances. I think I started The Code is Red once, but I didn't get very far. I didn't listen to the whole thing. More timing thing than anything. But yeah, they're always a band that I was just like very similar. It's like never got into them, but I know I'm supposed to respect them and appreciate them.
Yeah,
for what they did. I guess that comes down to I just don't listen to a lot of grind in general.
Yeah.
And the ones that I do like do things different than Napalm Death. And I think I appreciate the grind influence more than like grind as a genre.
Yeah.
I did send you, what was that, a TikTok last night that the way someone described like death vocals or deep gutturals. He said he described it as it's the sound of two bricks rubbing together. And I was like, hey, that is what that sounds like. I never got into Napalm Death. So this is can I give you my let me give you my experience leading up to getting to this record.
The reason I was laughing at the beginning.
Yeah. So you send me 4 albums that you're thinking about, and I'm at, well, my picks are Jesus and Mary Chain and Embrace. I think those are the ones that are most fun to talk about. And you were like, I'm feeling weird, so I thought you were gonna pick something else, not one of the 4 that you sent me. Instead, you're like, let's do the Napalm Death record. And I was like, that's the one I wanted to do the least out of those 4. I'm like, oh man. I was like dragging my feet coming into this record. I was like, God, I don't want to talk about Napalm Death. Like I don't want to listen to the record. I think is really what I wanted to say. I didn't want to listen to the record. So I put it on maybe Tuesday afternoon after work.
And you've never listened to this record properly?
No,
before,
I'd
right?
never listened to Scum before. I'd heard You Suffer. I'd heard some stuff. I probably heard songs off this record, but I'd never listened to this album. I put it on. I am immediately unhappy. I'm just like, this is what we're listening to. I think I texted you, this thing's got 28 fucking songs on it, to which you responded, it's less than 35 minutes long.
It's like 32 minutes.
Yeah. And then my response to that was too long. I listened to that entire record that day afternoon, not feeling it. I was like, oh, what are we going to say about this? Like, and I almost texted you, be like, I'm sure glad this band has a story, because I don't know what to say about this music, because I thoroughly did not enjoy it the first time I listened to it. And then I did a second listen to do my notes. And then while I'm making notes for track 16 or 17, I'm like, how am I going to say blast beats 15 more times? You know, like blast beats, fast song. And then sometimes you get like, ooh, slower riff starting song, then blast beats. And yeah, so it was tough for me to be like, how am I going to talk about this record? Did not want to get in. Did not want to listen to this record. Didn't want to listen to it a second time. I didn't listen to it a third time like I try to do for most records. I didn't even consider listening to it a third time. I was like, I know what it sounds like. So yeah, that was my journey getting into this, like, Napalm Death. Not for me, apparently, in any way, in any shape or form at this point.
So, I'm not too surprised. I'm not too surprised you didn't really like this record. You didn't enjoy it any more the second time?
I liked it a little better the second time, but it was still like, this doesn't need to be 28 tracks long. Each side has, it's interesting to compare it from a side to side perspective, just to be like, what's different about this lineup and recording versus the other side lineup and recording. That's what I find most interesting about this record. It's the fact that, like, all the songs sound the same, which is the point. That's what grindcore is. It's the genre. It's what it is. And I think it's why I don't get into grindcore that much in general. But just like the sameness of this record just really just was too. It's like each side could have been 10 tracks, and then we would have been good. I mean, you would not need an LP to do that, but
yeah. So I picked it out of an exploratory feeling. And I think I had an expectation, like, I might not like this. Like, when I picked it, I was like, there's a chance I won't enjoy this record. Because in my head, you know, it's a record I've heard before that I really couldn't distinguish any unique qualities about it or recall anything about it particularly that I even liked the first time I listened to it. Granted, it's been probably 10 years since I've listened to this record. So I was like, all right, let's put this on. Let's put this on and put the legacy to bed, I think was kind of my thinking going into it. Like, this is going to be the decisive, like, either this is like, it really is just first and that's why it's important, or there's something genuinely great about it. And my takeaway from it, I got to the end of the record, sameness aside, limitations of musicianship and recording quality aside, I think those are probably fair critiques of the record. I came away from the record thinking, fuck yeah, that's a great record. Not a record that's dense on, like, standout songs. There's a handful of songs I think if I ran through them, I could probably pick out the ones and be like, oh, that's got a really sick riff. I really like that idea. That's a thing with heavy music that I've always struggled with talking about. Even hardcore records that I love that we've talked about before, I'm like, yeah, there's like a part that's like really chunky. It's like, that's all of it. Like, it's such a hard genre to talk about. I can't imagine trying to write about heavy music as like a music critic. I've tried to write about heavy music in the past, and it's just like this totally caustic, apocalyptic wind of a record. You're just writing fucking fantasy descriptions. Like, you know, how much can you really talk about it, but in detail? But that's where a lot of what I enjoyed about the record was, in that I can listen to it and I can really not latch on to particular elements of this record until they really demand your attention. And the overall, like, aura of it was really entertaining to me. And I was just, like, really plugged into that energy and feeling of the record the whole time. It was just like, this feels like a genre being born in front of you. Like, it's kind of ugly. but it's really interesting to sit there and watch it. I also think the album cover fucking rules. Like,
The album cover is the best part of the record.
it is. It really sets me up. Designed by Jeff Walker of Carcass. But
Yeah.
also, the interesting thing though, one of the interesting things about like the record itself, the songs, like I kind of had it in my head that there's in the way it's described, that there's a pretty stark difference between the A and B sides, the difference between the different vocalists, the difference in songwriting. I think there's a noticeable difference. There's definitely a pretty noticeable difference. When you hit the B side, you're like, the guitars sound pretty different. Just a lot rubberier and darker and deeper. But I was kind of surprised. I liked the A side more. I listened to this record twice this week, actually.
Wow. Behind the curtain peek there, Dylan doesn't always listen to the records twice.
Yeah, I did actually give this one a second listen. There's a reason I gave it a second listen. But we'll talk about the record first. And
I want to
Go
bounce off of what you just said a second ago, though, about you can tell the difference whenever it switches. Listening to it the first time through, like I didn't know the story of the band at all. I was kind of listening to it blind, and other than like I know who Napalm Death is and I know who was in this band. That's what I know. Lee Dorian was the vocalist. I assumed they were all Lee Dorian. The whole record was Lee Dorian. Did not know the story. And listening to it, the first time through, when I was having such a bad time listening to it, I noticed a change. I was like, something sounds different here. And I just chalked it up to probably 2 different recording sessions is how I noticed something was different. It wasn't until I did the close listening and then reading the history of the band and be like, oh, it's 2 different lineups and 2 different recording sessions and 2 different producers. And well, the first producers, the bands that are credited as producers, like Head of David, and
they had like 20 people in the studio.
It's because they were just people hanging out in the studio. And my guess is like somebody in the band was like, hey, you should do this, like do like that. And then they got a producer credit because of it.
Well, yeah, because they're anarchists.
Yeah, right.
They're like, yeah, you got credit. Like I think somebody lent Justin Broderick like a guitar pedal, so they gave him a producer credit.
Yeah, I do like that aspect of it.
Yeah, but I liked the more crust-leaning side of the A side more. I think that the B side does suffer a little bit from being Mick not really knowing how to play the guitar and writing a lot of the riffs, and just them having not enough time to kind of the A side had songs that existed for like years. Like Justin Broderick brought in stuff from that he had written in like the early 80s that he just never really used for anything. So there's definitely a lot more time has been spent on the riffs and the ideas of the song. So there's a firmer idea of what the idea of the song is going into most of the A side, and the B side is very rushed and quick and just like, which is interesting to see what these amateurs are able to pull off, because I do think the B side is enjoyable.
It's interesting because I was thinking of that too. I was like, okay, what is the primary, like, what are the standouts upon each side? And side A, you're right. It feels like it's better written songs. I think mixed drumming is actually better on the A side.
Yeah.
Which is probably chalked up to the B side just being like, how are we going to write? Oh, just blast beat it. Okay.
Yeah.
So he didn't have those down. So I definitely think that's it might even be technically better produced, but it's also like a drier production.
Yeah.
Like it's a much tinnier production, which if you really think about what Justin Broderick later does, like that kind of makes sense too, with like the Godflesh stuff. And then on the B side, I was like, well, the playing is not as good. They're not like Mick's not as tight. This is clearly Lee's first band. And even the guitar riffs are just like, the B side feels much more repetitive, but it's tough. I like the songs on the A side better, but I like the production on the B side better because I like the lower end.
Yeah.
I like Bill's guitar tone better than Justin's guitar tone. And I like Lee's voice better.
Lee is a better vocalist.
Yeah.
Despite his limitations, he is a better vocalist. Yeah. I think that's a pretty fair assessment too. And it's a really interesting record to look at. It's the difference between almost a year between sides. And it's the crust roots and the future of a genre. being born, split by two sides of a record, which is there's nothing like that.
Yeah.
So I got to the end of this record and I'm like, well, this band stayed around forever. And then like I'm reading the story because I'm like, okay, let me like put together the pieces of the story like that I've had loose in my head. I know there's like different vocalists and different members between the two sides, but you know who stays in the band. And then I'm like, oh yeah, Lee didn't stay in the band for very much longer after this. And so I was just thinking like, oh, I know Barney comes in at a certain point and is just like in the band forever after that. So I was like, well, I'm kind of curious. Like, I've heard some later stuff that I've enjoyed. I've heard some later stuff I didn't enjoy. What else is there? Let me kind of dig a little more. Let me hear some of their other stuff that they listen to. And so I listened to Scum on Monday of this week, I believe. Yeah. So like Monday lunchtime, like I ate lunch, did the dishes, listening to this record, kind of just got sucked into the feeling of it. And I was like, I want to listen to some more of their stuff. So I think it pretty much immediately put on the next album. And then I listened to the next album. And then I listened to the next album. Pretty much, I think once I got to the end of the second record, from Enslavement to Obliteration, I was like, am I doing this? Yeah, I'm doing it. And I put on Harmony Corruption and I'm like, this is really good. Like, and it's really getting into a little more death metal, a little more early 90s kind of death metal. And I'm like, that's pretty fucking good though. Barney's a cool vocalist. These riffs are pretty sick. I did a Napalm Death week. I listened to basically nothing but Napalm Death.
How far did you get?
Between Monday and today. So I listened to 8 full albums.
What?
Scum twice.
So what? Okay, tell me which ones you did.
So I just went in chronological order. I did skip Diatribes, the 1996 record, because I actually listened to it earlier this year. Because it's on my calendar. It was a January record. And I was like, oh, I'm interested enough in that. Didn't like Diatribes that much the first time I listened to it, but I just chalked that up for being what it is. It was in the middle of their, or actually at the beginning of what's called their groove era. So Napalm Death's, history and the progression as a band creates grindcore and then kind of stopped playing grindcore for the 90s. Capital letters grindcore. There's definitely that grind element there, but definitely leaning more into death metal. And they got really into like Helmet and took on, a lot of the groovy quality stuff. There's kind of some industrial-ish stuff. Diatribes, I think, is the weakest record in that run. I listened to everything from Scum until their 2000 record, Enemy of the Music Business.
So that's Scum twice, From Enslavement to Obliteration, Harmony Corruption, Death by Manipulation, Utopia Banished, Fear, Emptiness, Despair. You skipped Diatribes and you listened to Inside the Torn Apart.
Which one did you say between
Fear, Emptiness, and Despair?
Before that one?
Utopia Banished.
Yeah. Enslavement, Harmony Corruption, Utopia Banished, Fear, Emptiness, skip Diatribes, listen to Inside the Torn Apart, Words from the Exit Wound, and Enemy of the Music Business.
Oh, I see. There's okay, yeah. Because of the reissues, they're in a different order, so I see. Yeah. God damn. Well, okay, then what? I guess you like Napalm Death, right?
Yeah. Like, I'm really surprised by that. Like, I was just like, I was not expecting to do a gauntlet run of Napalm Death records. I was like, I thought I'd listen to this record once and be like, it's not great. It's not their best, but it is really great in a very specific kind of way. I really, really liked Utopia Banished. I thought that was a really good record. And Words from the Exit Wound, their 98 record, which was the last of their groove metal records, and which they get that there's a groove influence. It doesn't sound like Helmet or anything. Like, it's definitely like a death grind band with just kind of a little bit more of a Sepultura prong, aspect. But Words from the Exit Wound, I really enjoyed. And it's the last of those groove records. It's one of their lower rated records. I think it's really underrated. Enemy of the Music Business is more of a return to form, and it starts their 2000s to now kind of much more consistent grindcore, back to basics, Napalm Death. This is the genre we created, records. And it's it's really, really good too. But yeah, I don't know why I just like leaned into it, and it just, the momentum, I didn't get tired of doing it. Because I've done that before. And it's funny, the last time we did 87, I was like, okay, let me listen to as many Poison Idea records as I can. Because I'm like, I don't know this band. They're important. I like some of what I'm hearing. So I started on their first record, and I made it up to like the third or fourth record, I think, probably, before we ended up recording. But so I was like, all right, well, I guess this is a year that I deep dive bands' discographies off of. But yeah, I really liked them. I'm very interested to hear, because a lot of their 2000s records are some of their most well-regarded records, like The Code is Red.
I was looking at that. You were liking the stuff that's like the lowest well-regarded stuff.
Like Diatribes and Inside those are the weakest point in the band. They have moments, but Words from the Exit Wound is a really good record. And what's really interesting, like I was listening to their records, I was picking up all these things that I probably have known that Napalm Death is like an influence on Converge, an influence on a lot of the mathcore bands. But there were like specific parts, specific kinds of blasts and drum fills and riffs and kind of patterns. And I'm like, oh yeah, Converge picked up a bunch of stuff from Napalm Death.
I mean, they're important. So I guess what I was thinking of too is I was like, Napalm Death are probably more important to metal, as a genre than so much punk as a genre. The reason why, because I've always thought of grindcore as more of a metal style of music anyway, but because it like spins directly out of crust and anarcho-punk, that's why grind is considered a subgenre of punk, because it's literally a straight line, to grindcore. It's just that what grindcore was doing was only influential, for the most part, influential on metal music. Like, is this the first band to do like Cookie Monster vocals for like a metal, like, I don't know who starts that sound in metal, death growls and gutturals and stuff like that.
Napalm Death are, I think, pretty important to that development of that vocal style. Cannibal Corpse kind of around the same time, though, as Barney taking over vocals in Napalm Death.
Yeah, but Lee is doing it before Barney is.
Got some, he kind of has some deeper,
though.
Not as much.
The B-side is interesting because that is where you have more than one vocalist on there, because Mick is doing vocals on the B-side too.
Yeah.
And I think Mick's doing the screechy thing. The B-side of this, I was like, oh, this is what grindcore becomes. The whoa, 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 whoa,
yeah,
that kind of grindcore. Power Violence, I think, takes that and uses it more so.
Yeah.
I also think Power Violence is taking grindcore and putting more punk elements back into the sound.
Well, so Power Violence to me, honestly, if you say grindcore, probably what I hear in my head is Power Violence.
Yeah.
Grindcore is kind of a funny genre in the way that I can't think of very many, if any, bands that honestly just get called straight grindcore. And maybe it's just the way metal works, where they're just like, oh, well, I hear a bit of death in that, so that must be death grind. Yeah. It's like, can't it just be another genre? Does it need to be grindcore and then death grind and
deathcore?
Power Violence and cyber grind? And like, is Power Violence really that different from what grindcore started out as? I think it's faster.
Yeah.
It pushes towards faster, but that's not even consistently true, because Man is the Bastard is not fast.
Man is the Bastard is also the band that came up with the term Power Violence. So like,
yeah, we weren't trying to name a genre.
Yeah. Because most of their stuff is like noise and like slow. Like most of Man is the Bastard's music is not fast music. But to me, like, I
mean, grindcore is, I guess it's Terrorizer, Repulsion, Nasum.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Power Violence to me feels like, I think they're trying to be a little bit more just punky, just a little faster, just play it faster, more stripped down and faster is what I think of Power Violence. So grind, you can be like a really good, like, grind did really push boundaries in metal. It helps to have Bill Steer in your band, who's also like one of the fucking best death metal guitarists of all time in Carcass. And that was their thing going into it. It was they were just like, we want to push boundaries. We want to, take things to the furthest that it can be. And to the point that they took it so far that they like left the band and started and did other things. Like took it to the extreme. And then he goes, all right, I'm going to go make one of the greatest death metal records of all time with Heartwork.
5-star record.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Like, and Justin Broderick goes and like takes the Ministry and like Big Black sound and then like makes it its own thing with Godflesh.
Makes it freakier.
Yeah. Like industrial and noise rock as one genre. And then just reinvents things again with like the post-metal Jesu records. And then Lee Dorian going and being in like one of the longest running doom metal bands of all time too. Like Cathedral has a shitload of records. Is he still in? Is it one of those bands that he also left, or is he still in Cathedral?
I think he's still the guy in Cathedral.
Like everyone else is the extra. Like they change, but let's see. Yeah, Lee Dorian still vocals, and Gaz Jennings still guitar. So, which there are 10 Cathedral records.
Yeah,
starting in '91. I don't love Cathedral. They're not my favorite doom metal band.
I never really connected with them.
But he's doing more like sung vocals, right? Like that's not a doom, and that's not a death vocal. So it's funny to think that he goes and does that. He's like one of those like, I'm doing doom in a period where doom isn't actually that popular anymore. So that makes it a little bit more important to like the longevity of doom music.
Well, and he definitely helps to bring a lot of attention back to doom metal.
Yeah. Doom. Yeah. So
another thing in my Napalm Death week that I came to really appreciate about them, and there's, with significant lineup changes, I was just kind of like, well, this is a metal band.
Yeah.
And that's a scene that has some issues. So I was like, okay, Napalm Death and their politics. I'm like, I know this record, multinational corporations, it's pretty anti-capitalist, but that's, early lineup crust band. And I remember them being very critical of like the war in Iraq and George Bush and, really just American interference with, global politics and stuff. So I was like, I feel like they're probably politically pretty good, pretty safe. And I couldn't find anything bad about them.
Yeah.
Honestly, like I didn't dig super hard. I didn't go through every band member who's ever been in, to see if there's anything that's icky that's ever happened with them. But I didn't come up with anything. There's no real like controversies that come up. They've been really consistent with their politics for a long time. And the songs have always been very anti-capitalist, very humanist.
They're animal rights people too, right?
Some of them are animal rights people. And I mean, Carcass I think all of Carcass are like vegans or whatever.
Yeah. Because they're funny to think of all their bloody album covers and they're a vegan band.
Yeah. Hardline vegan band. Like,
oh yeah, like cattle decap.
Yeah. So they've stayed consistent politically left and more so, and which is like in metal, it's very hard to do.
Yeah.
It's very hard to be outspokenly leftist in metal. A genre that likes to say, no politics in metal, but then also it's just like freedom of speech, man, whenever there's like Nazi bands.
Yeah.
So, and Napalm Death have canceled shows because of who else was on the lineup. So they've been able, they have sacrificed gigs and, a paycheck to say like, oh, no, I'm not going to play with a nationalist band. Fuck them. Like, they may have to kind of pick their battles. You could probably find them on a lineup somewhere at some point with someone who's not great, but they've at least made an attempt to try to avoid those shows and cancel shows to bring attention to it. I think also particularly in an era where people were often overlooking the National Socialist black metal bands.
Yeah.
They were just like, yeah, cool. I'm going to go see.
Let's go see Bathory. Let's go see
Bathory's
Marduk.
okay.
Bathory, they're okay one?
Bathory's okay. Yeah.
Okay. I never
They
know.
just are really into Viking shit, which is a red flag, but like they've really, they haven't crossed over from just being into Viking shit. I found interviews with like Barney and like 2009-ish, whereas like someone was talking to them. He was like, I think they maybe asked if they were feminists or like was responding to something that had said before. And it's like, would you describe yourselves as a feminist band? They're like, yes, we're a feminist band. Like, yes, we sing about equality, and we don't just call it equality because that's not where we are as a society. Like we have to be more than that. We have to specifically focus on these issues, and so I think they're good ones consistently.
Yeah.
Which kind of led me down. I was like, well, I guess I should go listen to Bolt Thrower because they're like super left too. I was like looking at different bands that are kind of in the same vein of being outspokenly leftist. Not very many in metal.
Yeah, it tends to be in like punk mainly. But even then, it's like I think some of the more like most left like musicians are usually like noise, like avant-garde, like true outsider weirdos who are like on top of just being outsiders in their daily lives, they are outsiders in music as a genre. So
yeah, I mean that scene also has plenty of horrible people, but
yeah, it's weird how I guess it's an outsider scene, so it means you're gonna get all kinds of outsiders in there.
Yeah.
So it's a tough one. Yeah like again, Napalm Death band I respect. It's so funny that you listen to the record and you go, I gotta have more, and then you you mainline like 4 or 8 albums or something like that
through what's considered their worst period.
Right, you haven't even hit their best stuff yet.
Yeah,
like it's the later stuff is more well regarded than even this record. This record's actually like kind of mid level for them as far as like critical appraisal.
It gets the most attention, and it's not without its flaws, so I think that's understandable.
Yeah, its importance outweighs its like quality. Yeah. And I listen to it and I go, I don't think I'll ever listen to Napalm Death ever again if I can avoid it. I'm curious about the Barney stuff. I do think that the songwriting is probably better during that era.
It is. The production's better. The riffs are better. There were so many moments in listening to all of the records that I listened to where I was just nodding my head. I was like, man, that's good. That's just a good riff or a good groove or a cool vocal part. Like it very noticeably pulled me in several times. And I mean, yeah, if you like later Converge, there's plenty of Napalm Death stuff that you would like. If you like fast Converge, you like Napalm Death. Because there's a lot of similarities.
Yeah, I mean, it goes on to be an important record. Kerrang called it the 50th best British album of all time. It's the number 5 on Terrorizer's list of essential European grind albums. Hyper-specific list there. I kept reading about how it was so important to European grind. Everyone's specifically saying European grind as a genre. Does Repulsion take the American grind? Like they're the American Napalm Death just because they're super important for that over here? I don't know. It's so weird. I kept seeing European as like a disclaimer. I'm like, what? Are there better grind bands, I guess?
Well, and Terrorizer was a US band too. A lot of really important grind bands are American, actually. Like Big Destroyer.
And this is another 1001 albums to hear before you die. This is actually like in the book, the actual book that's been published. But it's important. I respect it. I didn't like it. Like, very little stood out to me as far as enjoyable songs. I think the best song on here was Siege of Power. I think that might be my favorite song on the entire album. Yeah. Or Divine Death. That's one on each side that I'm like, that's pretty good. Because those are the songs that had the most happening, that weren't just that same riff over and over again and blast beats,
Euroblasts.
Yeah. So yeah. Not for me. Probably.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't have expected you to love this record. I was thinking about it. I was like, I guess you can punish me on the next one.
Well, that was my thinking. I was like, you're getting punished on the next.
But I was just like, what are you going to punish me with?
What I would punish you with would be just something that's really bad that I think is funny how bad it is, but you are just like, ugh. Because I I can laugh at how bad something is easier than you can, I think.
Yeah.
I can listen to a With Blood Comes Cleansing record and just be like, listen to how dumb this sounds. And then you'll be like, oh, God. I guess
yeah. Yeah. I think the joke runs thin for me in those instances. I was just thinking, what's the most forgettable, like, pop punk that I could see you getting into if you give it a chance, that I'm like, this is a chore.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd have to think. Just give you a Static X record. It's like, this isn't punk at all. Yeah, we're doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. A new metal record could do it. Yeah.
Yeah. Man, I'll have to dig. I'll have to see. It's also going to be based on rotation. Though we did say for birthdays we were going to do punishing for our birthdays this year. Do you want to do?
We're going to punish each other?
I was going to say, for your birthday, do you want to be the punisher or the punishee? Like, I guess that's the...
What's going to get you off?
I guess if it's your birthday, you should be the one who gets the joy out of it. So you should be the punisher, I guess, for your birthday.
I was thinking it should go the other way. For your
because
birthday,
it's your birthday,
you get your birthday spankings.
Yeah, that could work too.
It's like giving a gag gift.
See, the thing is, my birthday's like in the middle of man, that'll be easy. Just you get to choose the psychobilly record we do.
Right.
Oh, we're listening to Wednesday 13. Oh no.
It's just a problem with a lot of stuff that I could punish you with. I would also be punishing myself with.
Yeah, that's a fine line. You don't want to make it hard on yourself. So it needs to be something that you can get enjoyment out of, but you know the other person's gonna be like, "Oh, you're not gonna like this." We'll figure it out when we get to it. But yeah.
I guess if I have to stick to the theme, I can't hit you with like a John Zorn record or something.
Woof.
Yeah, I don't know if I can cross that bridge yet. I haven't tried.
I guess we could always do like a week of relief too, not do the theme all the way through, or we just save it for like the first week after. Celebrate my birthday in November. Observed. Well, you want to give it a rating?
I'm gonna give it a 4. It's a solid 4 to me, despite its flaws. It has something special.
I don't know how to rate this because it's like,
you can rate on pure enjoyment. You don't have to give it a respecting the legacy rating. That's whenever I listen to something that I'm like, I didn't like this, but I don't hate that it exists. I don't want to take away something that's important to other people. That only gives it like an extra half a point for me. So
legacy is like a half point. Okay, that does kind of make sense.
I think honestly, probably in pure enjoyment, Scum is probably a 3.5, and I am giving it a half point for its legacy.
Well, I'm giving it a 2. I did not enjoy the experience to listen to this record.
I think most of our listeners would not enjoy this record.
Oh yeah, I mean, I know our listeners too. And when you selected it, I was like, they're not gonna like the music. They may enjoy the episode, but we've had those comments before where they're like, great episode, I didn't care for the music, but I liked what you guys said. We've gotten that plenty of times. That's when we tend to get like niche and into like our specific areas of interest, or more of our youthful areas of interest.
Yeah.
Yeah. Enjoyment wise, it's getting a 2. Honestly, it's getting an extra half a star because of the legacy, and it's still only at a 2 for me. Yeah. It's important, but I don't like it. So that's a fair way to break it down. So, well, thank you everyone so much for listening. You can follow us on all forms of social media: Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, X, Threads. Everybody just calls it Twitter still. I think it's very hilarious that no one calls it X. Blue Sky, whatever. Think of it. We're at
when
it.
I type in twitter.com, it still goes there.
Yeah.
And the URL still says twitter.com.
Yeah. Anywhere you can think of to follow us, we are there at Punk Lotto Pod. And we have a voicemail line, 202-688-PUNK. We have a Redbubble shop. We have, what else do we have? Patreon.com/PunkLottoPod. Yeah, I think that's everything.
Yeah. And if you
awards,
if you want to, check out Major Awards Band, wherever. put those words together, and it should lead you there. Hit me up on Twitter if you want to talk Napalm Death. Give me your Napalm Death hot takes over there. Somebody out there who enjoys this, please get in touch with me. I don't want to be alone.
No, I mean, Napalm Death's very well respected, so I know one listener who may be into it. We'll see. But yeah, thank you everyone so much for listening, and we will talk to you later.
To order Punk, call the number on your screen. Rush delivery is available. Remember, this special offer is not sold in stores.